The Klon Centaur is one of the most iconic, sought after, and expensive pedals out there today, partly due to scarcity, but mostly due to the countless guitar players who have iconically used the Klon Centaur Overdrive over the years. Thankfully these days there are now numerous Klon clones available to buy, and many of them are tonally comparable to the original, including the one platumnus, which is the Klon clone that I have. But I don't always like the sound of the Klon Centaur. The Overdrive is just very specific, and I only use my Klon for a couple of very specific things, which I will get to in this video. And the reason that I'm making this video is because I find the history of the Klon Centaur and all of the sort of mysticism around it just quite interesting. And I also think that there's a lot of misunderstanding around what the Klon sound actually is, or at least how it was intended to be used when it was first designed by Bill Finnegan. Bill designed the Klon along with two MIT electronic engineers between 1990 and 1994. The initial idea for the pedal was to adapt or reimagine the Tubescreamer circuit and make it slightly more open sounding and to change the mid-range characteristic. But for a couple of reasons, the Klon is definitely not a Tubescreamer. Firstly, the Klon has a mid-hump or a mid-push at around 1 kHz, which is completely different to the Tubescreamer, whose mid-range push is around 732 Hz. Now that difference of around 300 Hz will definitely be noticeable in the tone of the two pedals. And also you'll find that the Tubescreamer cuts a lot of the bass, which just further accentuates the mid-range character of the TS style circuit. And the Klon doesn't have that bass cut. That makes the Klon sound much more open. As I mentioned in last week's video, mid-range is so crucial to the guitar when helping it cut through a mix. And these two pedals, the TS and the Klon, do that in a different way. Interestingly, that 1K push in the mid-range of the Klon is actually exactly the same as the mid-range push in a Proco Rat, a completely different style of pedal. And that leads to the second key difference between the Klon and a Tubescreamer. The Tubescreamer and other TS style circuits are what we would typically refer to as soft clipping. Soft clipping devices typically respond similar to tube amps, where because of the harmonics and the compression, the transient of the waveform is just gently cut, leading in a softer, smoother sound that is pleasing to a lot of guitar players. Conversely, distortion pedals such as the Proco Rat utilize what we call hard clipping, where the actual transient is cut off at the top, leading to a much more aggressive sound. And you would think, given that its genesis was a Tubescreamer inspired circuit, that the Klon Centaur would be a soft clipping overdrive. But the interesting thing is that the Klon is actually a hard clipping device. And what makes this even more surprising is that the Klon isn't actually a high gain or a distortion pedal. It's not like the Proco Rat. So before you all go out and buy a Rat thinking that it's going to be a great alternative to the Klon Centaur, just be aware that the actual mid-push, yes, is going to be the same, but the actual overdriven sound of the overdrive portion of these circuits is very, very different. That hard clipping circuit utilizing germanium diodes, which when Bill was doing his initial design and testing for this pedal, definitely had a sound that he much preferred over the silicon alternatives. And when the pedal was released in 1994, it was definitely different to other overdrive pedals that were available in the market at that time. This made the Klon incredibly popular when it came out in 1994, and Bill and the team struggled to keep up with the demand. With each pedal being handmade, and with Bill testing every single pedal he made before shipping it, it resulted in only 8,000 units of the Klon being made between 1994 and when it was discontinued in 2008. For context, JHS pedals back in 2012 were making around 10,000 units a year, and they were considered boutique at that time, which is no shade being thrown at Josh. I love JHS pedals, but it does go to show the scale of Bill's operation at around about the same time. This brings me on to how the Klon was designed to be used and how I like to use a Klon style pedal in my setup. Firstly, other than its name, the Klon Centaur is not a mythical pedal. It's not the missing ingredient to a great overdriven tone, nor would I recommend spending the $5,000 or $6,000 that you would need to spend now in order to own this fabled pedal. Especially when you realise that how most people tend to use the Klon Centaur doesn't even utilise the full scope of the overdriven sound within the circuit. The gain control on the Klon acts as a clean blend. The more you turn up the gain, the more of your guitar's clean signal is going to be blended out, and the more of the circuit's gain sound is going to be blended in to your tone. This means if you're using your Klon as a clean boost, you're actually not utilizing the gain sound of those magical and mythical diodes. What you're mainly hearing is the EQ and how the volume of the pedal is naturally pushing your guitar and your amp into natural overdrive. And that natural compression in your amp's sound can be achieved in other ways. It isn't just the Klon that does this. You could get something like a Boss G7, which if you experimented and tweaked for a while, you could boost some frequencies and add some gain in a way that would be similar to the EQ response of a Klon. But that being said, the Klon Centaur definitely has some tricks up its sleeve that makes it great in this application. It utilizes an internal voltage conversion via a component known as a charge pump, which takes the 9 volts and converts it to 18 volts, giving the pedal more headroom. It also impacts the EQ slightly, adding a little bit more sparkle, and that combination of more headroom and more sparkle just makes the Klon sound much more open, and it's why a lot of guitarists love a Klon style pedal as a boost. But I believe that the Klon is only magical when used as intended. When Bill designed the circuit, he built it with the intention of it being used alongside an amp that was already naturally compressing on the edge of breakup or even overdriving. It was never designed to be used into a clean amp. This is where some misconceptions around the Klon Centaur circuit come into play. A lot of people will buy a Klon or a Klon style pedal, a clone, and they will run it as a clean boost with maybe the gain at around 9 o'clock, because that's how they see famous iconic Klon users such as John Mayer utilizing the pedal. Fender amps are not necessarily known for their edge of breakup or overdriven sounds. They are predominantly clean platforms, but what you will notice is that when people like John Mayer are using a Klon Centaur with their rig, is that they're playing at volumes that we will just never be able to achieve when playing at home. I'll be the first to admit, when I first bought my One Platumnus, I set it as John would set his Klon, and I played it into my Fender Blues Junior, and I was just massively underwhelmed by the sound. And then I saw John Mayer live, and it all started to make sense, because you realize how loud John plays and how much natural compression and harmonic content there is in his core sound through his amps. You quickly realize that you can never recreate that characteristic at home. We just can't turn our amps up loud enough, often enough, to be able to achieve the same results. And it makes you understand that in the realm of guitar pedals and guitar tone, that context is everything. This is why you'll often see the Klon used as a boost in conjunction with other overdrive pedals. This is how I like to use my One Platumnus. I've always loved clean amps. I'm a big fan of the Fender clean sound, and that's why I've never really loved using the Tumnus as my kind of sole overdrive pedal with the gain turned up, because I don't think it sounds that great. However, if I use it in conjunction with another overdrive pedal such as a Tubescreamer or a Noble's ODR1, then the resulting tone is nothing short of magical. That 1K boost in the mids is exactly what you need in that situation to cut through a mix. And the overdrive pedal that the Klon is boosting is acting as that amp at the edge of breakup that Bill would have been using to design and test his original circuit. But with all this being said, the Klon Centaur is definitely an iconic and important pedal, and it is unique in a lot of ways. But now in 2023, I can't recommend anybody owning or trying to buy an original Klon, unless of course you are a collector or have money to burn. But if you are just a guitar player who's interested in tone and getting the best tone possible with your gear, then it's more important to understand the role that the Klon circuit plays in the frequency response and in terms of EQ and gain, and how all of those pieces of the puzzle are working to create the tone of your guitar. It's more important to understand that, and then you'll begin to realize that there are a lot of different options that can help you recreate that same sound. The Klon does the Klon thing well. There's no arguments there, but it is not a jack of all trades. It's not super versatile. It's very, very specific, but it does do that very specific thing well. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to use it or say that there is a right and wrong way of doing things. If how you use your Klon style pedals sounds good to you, then that is, of course, the most important thing. However, I do think that this whole topic around this kind of fabled circuit and its uses and the misconceptions do make for some interesting debate at the very least. And I guess more than anything, I hope this video has cleared up a few things that you may have been wondering about the Klon style pedal and why it's so fabled and expensive. If you did enjoy this video, do let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, do consider hitting that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified of when new videos go live. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.